I'm calling the August 14th, 2018 meeting of the Mashpee Conservation Commission to order. Drew, you have some pre-post for us?
Yep, I haven't gotten to the August 9th minutes, so we'll have to table those for September 13th. A couple of updates. Before I get into the resource area delineation for Gooseberry Island and the appeal, it's not something that should be discussed at this meeting, because if you're going to discuss any sort of strategy regarding an appeal, it should be done under executive session. So it's just an update that the abutters to Gooseberry Island and the tribe have both submitted appeals to the order of resource area delineation that was approved, the ANRAD rather, that was approved by the commission at the last meeting. The grounds for which they're appealing are a lack of showing the two resource areas that were acknowledged, land containing shellfish and land under ocean around the island, and they're disputing the delineation of flood zone and delineation of coastal bank, not recognizing, claiming that we were not recognizing coastal flats and a small area of coastal dune that they allege exists on the island that was not part of the ANRAD and wasn't mentioned. It was delineated as salt marsh essentially. So the next step, whenever there's an appeal of a permit, whether it's an ANRAD or an order of conditions, is to have DEP schedule what's called a superseding onsite, where they send state reviewer down to Mashpee and they designate a location to meet with Conservation Commission members, conservation staff, abutters, and all representatives of both parties. And then they just kind of hash it out on both sides and get testimony from both sides. Then the reviewer goes back and comes up with what's called a superseding decision. It can go one of two ways. It can uphold the commission's determination, or the DEP can issue their own superseding order of resource area delineation if they feel it's necessary. So that's the protocol.
Simple question. I don't think we need to be in executive session. Have the two parties that are having exception to our finding, are they joined together in this action, or are
They
they filing
actually-
individually?
That's a good question. They submitted two different separate appeals, but in talking to counsel, she said that when that's the case, DEP just combines the two into one superseding onsite. So all parties will be invited to that. They won't hold two different superseding onsites because it's the same dispute, just two different parties.
Let's hope we get to it before November or something.
Yeah, hopefully. They can take the time. It's usually, on average, it's at least a month to a month and a half or longer before DEP schedules the superseding onsite, probably because they get so many of them. So depending on where it falls in their workload dictates when it'll happen, so. Also, I wanted to just update that I'm going to be looking at Kate and I are both going to be reviewing our Regulation 12, which deals with mitigation. Mitigation is compensatory planting requirements for when a particular project warrants some sort of remediation or mitigation plantings. So I wanted everybody to take a look at Regulation 12. If you don't have your binders yet, we'll get you one, but it's online as well. And just familiarize yourself with the regulation. It's very wordy. So I'll be looking to kind of slim it down too, to try and, make the language a little more concise and orderly, just like we did with Regulation 27, docks and piers. And also another thought that I had was the mitigation calculation chart, which is right now currently used in the case of waiver requests, that chart also be used for general mitigation guidelines, because I think that just makes sense to have a nice, solid reference point to go by rather than winging it when it comes to mitigation. And that gives nice 5-foot increments of calculations when it comes to how much mitigation a particular project warrants. And I think it makes sense to have that for the entirety of mitigation rather than just a waiver request. But I'll come up with some suggestions, and we'll go through the same process as we did with docks and piers.
If you do as fine a job as you did on the last one, I think we'll be happy.
This one's got a lot more details in it, you'll see when you read it. It goes into a very detailed depth. But yeah, over the next couple of weeks, just make it a point to read through, and if you have any ideas or feedback of your own, it'll be good. Next meeting, we'll put it up for discussion.
I think I'd like to see some consideration of a different formula for replacing trees.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Before we open the first hearing, is there anyone in the audience who would like to bring to the attention of the commission something which is not on the agenda? No, seeing none. I'm opening the 6 o'clock hearing for Stephen F. and Donna M. McDonald. This is 126 Waiting Place Road. Proposed demolition, reconstruction of a single-family dwelling, installation of a swimming pool, spa and connecting boardwalk, septic system upgrade, tree removal, and native vegetation plantings. This was continued on 7/26, where the commission requested a relocation of garage away from the resource area. It's an NOI.
Thank you for the recommendation of Tom Bunker with BSS Design. And I was here along with Mike Picard, landscape architect, on, July 27th. And did present this at that time. As you mentioned, the biggest concern was,
Do you want to use it? Oh, you got, excuse me.
All right.
of course, I brought
Times are good.
I brought what I thought was a pointer to Falmouth Conservation last night. It turned out to be just a pen. It didn't work. But I got the right one this time. Yeah, so this is the new plan. As you pointed out, the biggest concern was the location of the foundation within the naturally vegetated area. It's a permanent structure within the naturally vegetated area. So in this plan, we didn't have what I had was a line before showing basically is a sort of a line that we show using the lawn, showing the edge of lawn, which only came through to about this point in here where there was lawn. So I've extended that around, changed that to one of those like a scalloped kind of line, and this is the edge of the existing natural vegetated area through here, and that line is also shown through here. So the architect changed around the house, made it narrower in this dimension, and moved it closer to the road, or closer to the left lot line by about 1.5 foot. It was 15-foot setback, and it's now 13.2-foot setback here. So moved it 1.8 feet back closer to the lot line. It is still further from the lot line than the existing house, which may be allowed by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So he moved it over to the left and changed the shape, the configuration of the house and the garage in this location. So the foundation is no longer within the naturally vegetated area. So that has changed, and we changed the landscape architect and changed up some of this area, moved the pool, changed the shape of the pool, moved the patio and this retaining wall away from the wetland by about the same 1.8 or 2 feet away from the wetland in this location. There used to be a large stairway and other things going down around the end of the garage. That was taken off of the plan. I added some more drainage in this area, which will take the downspouts and whatever from the front of the house and any driveway drainage going into this point, and added some drainage along the edge of the pool patio, and that patio extends under that deck up against the house. So we put a trench drain along the edge there going into some dry wells, and that will also take in the roof downspout drainage. And then this hatching represents what will be natural vegetation before it came up this way along the side lot line. And so what was done here, more of it was put along here. I think before it was just out to the edge of what, there's a existing little bordering salt marsh right through here up at the top edge of the wall. And so what was here was spread out more along to give a little bit more buffer along that edge there. I labeled a couple of things. There's a grass path and some planting beds along here. So except for these little stairs right here, there's no hard surface within this area. It's just a lawn and planting beds up to where there'll be a fence required because of the swimming pool, and then everything outside of the fence up in this area will be natural vegetation. So those are the changes we had made to the plan. And I'll take any of your questions.
Just to clarify, the area around the isolated vegetated wetland, that's to remain naturally vegetated, that's not proposed to be cleared at all, is that?
Nothing will be
Yeah,
up until the limit of work.
up to the limit of work.
There is some clearing around the garage in the naturally vegetated area still.
37 feet.
But the
What was
garage
the-
got moved
yeah,
out of the
so-
natural vegetation.
Looking at the current setback.
Yeah, it's
30
improved.
34 feet is
We
the
have a little bit
existing.
more, 2 or 3 feet more setback to the wetland.
Yeah.
Yeah, 36. And you're still, in the left side setback is an improvement over the existing house, so
Yes.
even though you had to cheat on that
Slight
side a little
amount
bit,
better, yes, on the
yeah,
left
it's
side.
better than what it was.
Yeah, like I said, it still has to be approved by Board of Appeals, but
Yeah,
get through here first, but yeah,
just tell them what a great job you did in improving the situation.
yeah.
That helps.
Board of Health did submit their comments that the application is submitted under review. Property is in a Zone 2. Plans for review of a conventional Title V system to accommodate an existing 4-bedroom dwelling.
So you've added a swimming pool.
No, there was a
No, it
pool
was-
there already.
It was part of
On the previous plans, there was a pool. It's just got
Where is
slightly different shape than it was before.
I'm just not seeing the pool.
I don't see, I don't see
Oh,
it.
I see. This is
It was on the proposed plan from last time.
the old proposed plan.
Yeah, the old land.
Yeah, there's not a pool on the site now.
Between,
Oh, sorry.
no, between the resource area and the proposed pool, this white area, is that proposed to be grass?
Yes, it's what it is now, yes.
Okay. It's,
And a boardwalk going to the pier.
okay.
So it's this, all of this.
It'll be
grass
more of the
area.
same, okay.
Yeah, and the grass will have to meet the lawn standards, so it'll have to be a 90% rye fescue turf mix, no more than 10% Kentucky bluegrass. And just for the benefit of our new commissioners, this is the existing conditions photos that you can see. So you can see it's a case where it's pretty common in New Seabury. You have lawn going almost all the way up to the top of a small retaining wall bulkhead, stone bulkhead, before Pompanesett Creek. So the reason we had, when you go back and look at the plan, on the previous plan, there was some mitigation that was slated for this side of the property over here. And I had recommended that that be taken and put over here to turn what was originally proposed to be a 10-foot wide buffer strip of plantings into a 20-foot wide, because you're going to have so much lawn behind it. And granted, it is going to be, a Cape Cod lawn seed mix. You'll still have this buffer where currently there is nothing. As you can see, there's a thin strip of some scattered shrubs and some native grasses, but that's it. So this will be greatly enhanced in this area. in exchange for the larger footprint house. And then over here, best picture of it, but over here on the right, actually go back to the previous photo. This area here, this is the buffer where the garage was going to, the foundation was cutting in, and now it's gonna be moved, as you can see on the plan, to this area. So it'd be a garden that will be impacted as opposed to the naturally vegetated area. Back behind this area is where that isolated dashed outline of the isolated wetland is located, down past this vegetated buffer. And then just another shot of the front of the home. You see on the plan, the pine trees, those are gonna be unaffected, they to remain. You show the
They appear to be.
driveway.
Some right along the road, yeah,
Yeah.
there are one or two for the septic system
Right,
that would have to come out over on the left-hand side.
okay.
We need a 5-foot strip out for the septic.
So everything that was of a concern from the last meeting, I
Yes.
think has been addressed pretty nicely.
Absolutely. I agree. Is this wet now? This wetland, is it wet? know?
It's wet,
Yeah,
It's wet even now.
yeah.
probably even now, yeah.
I remember a couple of months back when it was all rain, there were ducks swimming all around
Oh,
that
yeah.
area.
Paddling around.
Part of our lawn was that way.
Yeah.
Ducks and,
Yeah.
are there any questions from the audience? Comments?
Ready? I would move that we close an issue in regards to the application of Stephen F. and Donna M. McDonald, 126 Waiting Place Road.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Please say
Aye.
aye.
Aye,
Aye.
You have a quorum, so Marty doesn't vote.
okay.
So,
Motion passes.
Drew, could I ask you for the extension request at the end? Do you need me?
You don't need you here, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, no
Thank you.
issues. All right, thank you.
I'm opening the 603 hearing. This is for Michael R. and Maria S. Martone, 78 Buccaneer Way, the proposed construction of a pier, ramp, and float, and removal of nuisance vegetation. There's a request, I believe, from the applicant to continue this until 9/13 at 6 PM. It's an NOI.
I would move that we honor the request of the applicant to move this application to 9/13 at 6 PM.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
okay.
Continued. Opening the 606 hearing, Kenneth E. Marsters et al. Trustees, 55 Palmer Road. This is for the proposed construction of a single-family dwelling, garage, and septic system with landscape and hardscape modifications. It's an NOI.
Good evening, Mike Ball from Marsh Matters Environmental. I'm here on behalf of Prime Homes, Ken Marsters. As you mentioned, this is a single-family home construction
Mike,
project.
Do you have the speakers? Thank you.
You know, I have 91 and 55 all mushed together, but I separate them
Fine.
and, sorry. They all come in at once and I just put them in a big pile.
That's fine.
Yeah, so this is, in fact, we developed this, the lot right next to it last year for Dan Marsters, and this lot 55 is very similar to that one. There is riverfront area, there's buffer zone to BVW. If you've been to the site, the resource areas, as you can see up there, it's an old cranberry bog that's been long abandoned. That's your BVW. The river there, which is the source of the riverfront area, is, what's the river there?
Quashnet.
It's the Quashnet, correct. This is interesting. You're probably familiar on the Cape. They're starting to reduce the amount of space that they've identified as priority and estimated habitat. And this is one of those sites, whereas last year it was mapped as estimated habitat, and now it's no longer mapped. So just thought that was very interesting. You kind of keep your eyes on those maps because they do change
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Political pressure on
Yeah, yeah, we don't go there, but I have a feeling. So this, I know we got comment back from the DPW about keeping stormwater on the site, and I believe that either that plan's been submitted or it's about to be, showing all dry wells.
I think it was,
installed.
yeah. I think there was a new, I think I have it up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a small amount of lawn, it is within your standards. Engineering Works did this lot, McIntyre has done a lot of lots on this road, and this one is just very similar, a pretty modest-sized house, a little bit of lawn. It is a site that, at one time, as you can see from the pictures, probably had some topography on it, but when they created the subdivision, they cleared all the trees, and they took the sand and gravel from the site. So this is one of those sites that's was probably going to be developed decades ago, and it just never was. And so they finally decided to go forward with development. So, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I did have one question. I'll just go back to one of the slides that just to kind of illustrate what my question would be. The topography, goes up towards the back of the lot.
Yep.
And ramps up to a bank, and then it slopes back down towards the BBW in Quashnet. I did see that one of the stakes, and I can't really see it too well from I don't think I even got, but it's looking at this side over here, there's a stake here, and then there's a stake up on the embankment back here. And I think it had to do with some of the clearing on the lot. My question is, because I didn't really see anything on the plan, when you're digging into that kind of sand hill, basically, is there any means to, stabilize it once what's going on back there once excavation, if the project is approved, excavating into that, consolidated sand hill, basically, is there any plan for a retaining wall or anything like that, or do you see it necessary, or am I?
I don't see a retaining wall in the design.
Okay.
So what I'm assuming is they will excavate as needed into that hillside, and then
Yeah.
the slope will kind of conform to the angle of repose for,
Okay.
gravelly sand, and I'm not sure what degree that is. But
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, is what's the degree of slope, because it's not a real, it's just pile of sand with
Yeah.
vegetation growing through it, so when you excavate it, I just picture it
Slide,
just
yeah.
coming right down.
Yeah,
and,
it's, again, it'll just come down to its natural slope.
Okay.
It's possible that when the design was in process, not seeing a resource downslope, they may have just said it's not necessary. I think the applicant and the engineer would be fine if there was a condition to stabilize the slope of some
Yeah, I think
type
just
of
some kind of,
sand. Yeah,
or even
sometimes
wait and see kind of approach, and if it looks like it's gonna be an issue after excavation, some sort of retaining wall or something might be beneficial there, just to keep that separation between inner and outer
Yeah.
riparian, because it's very close to that
Yep,
zone,
Yeah.
so.
certainly wouldn't want to undermine any trees,
Right,
that could be
yeah,
okay.
exactly, yeah. Everything is pretty much laid out in the project narrative as far as how the project meets the performance standards for riverfront. You can see on the plan that there's the delineation of setback from bordering vegetated wetland, which is in this area back here. This is the BVW area, and then you've got the Quashnet River running behind it. So you do have inner and outer riparian zones. Riverfront carries a 200-foot zone of jurisdiction. And the performance standard for riverfront development within riverfront is that what they refer to as the 0 to 100, which is the inner riparian be left undisturbed if it's not already previously disturbed, if there's not a pre-existing non-conforming structure there already. So if it's an undisturbed buffer in the first 100 feet, it is to remain undisturbed. The second, which is called the outer riparian, the 100 to 200-foot setback, there are allowances under the regulations for development as long as they're kept within a certain square footage, and there's special considerations for single-family homes on pre-disturbed lots. So it's all spelled out in the associated narrative. And so it meets the performance standards for Riverfront, and it meets the performance standards for BVW. There's no impact to either resource area resulting from what's being proposed. I believe the Board of Health, looking for something from them, yeah. Board of Health has submitted an application, it's currently under review. Project is not in a Zone 2. Plans under review for a Title V system to accommodate the proposed 4-bedroom dwelling. And all areas of lawn obviously will fall under the lawn standards for the bylaw. So that aspect of it also meets the performance standards. And then I saw from the description, there's also going to be some planting of native material around the lawn area,
Yeah, yeah.
transition it back into the,
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
Pete wanted to make it clear, and I wanted to make clear in the narrative that any area that's not lawn will be a combination of native shrubs and mulch. There was no specific landscaping plan done, but I think the important thing is that the amount of lawn is beneath the threshold.
yep, yeah. And DPW also, in addition to the runoff capture, they do require a curb cut permit. So I'm sure the applicant knows that, but just, Catherine wanted to make sure I mention it.
Yeah, and we forward that along to the engineer, so he's aware.
Yep. I have no other comments.
Pretty straightforward.
Is there any other comments or questions?
Seeing none, hearing none, I guess I would move that we close and issue in regards to the application of Kenneth E. Marsters at 55 Palmer Road.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Aye?
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
it passes.
Thank you.
Bay Shore.
Okay. Opening the 6:09 hearing for Paul J. and Catherine D. McBrien, 91 Bay Shore Drive. This is the proposed amendment of an existing order of conditions, DEP number 432851, for a modification of the building footprint, and removal of a pool and patio. It's an AOOC.
Mike Ball again from Marsh Meadows Environmental. Also here for Mr. McBrien, who's met tonight. But I was working primarily for Ray Maceo on the vineyard. He's your builder, I believe. And the McBriens have purchased the lot. I had done a notice of intent and received an order of conditions from you last year, maybe the year before. Single-family house in a lot between two developed lots. The McBriens purchased the lot fairly recently, and just as happens when you change ownership, they want to tweak the design. And so Pete McAtee Engineering Works revised the plan to show a slightly adjusted footprint. Originally, there was a pool that was proposed. You can kind of see it in light gray in the southwest corner of the site. That's been removed. No pool is proposed. The amount of lawn, I believe, is still within the threshold that's allowed. Resource areas here are coastal bank, where you've got a buffer zone from that bank extending onto the lot. There is salt marsh further seaward on the other side of a road. There's kind of an old cart path between the lot and the resource area. So again, it's a fairly simple redesign. No issues with septic system. And again, the pool was removed. I think they added a deck. No priority habitat, no estimated habitat of rare species, and it meets your performance standards. So, be happy to answer any questions.
Pretty minor changes.
So yeah, this was, about, I think it was a year ago that it was proposed. And just to show you the general area of the lot, this is the location right here. So you've got your, coastal bank is really one of those kind of slope definition only ancient coastal bank topography feature that it's not a coastal bank that is eroding and provides a sediment source for coastal resource areas like beach and dune. There's a clear vegetated area here that leads up to the salt marsh. So this coastal bank is really, the performance standard is a vertical buffer for storm surges. That's the main performance of and wildlife habitat corridor as well. So most of the parcel, or about half the parcel, is within that buffer zone to coastal bank, or actually most of it, I think. It did receive an order of conditions about a year ago. So an amendment, this is an amendment request to reduce the footprint by eliminating the pool and patio, and I think there were some minor landscape changes, locations, lawn. Pretty straightforward. It does meet the performance standard for coastal bank and land subject to coastal storm flow, and if anything, it's probably an improvement from the last proposal, which involved more impervious structure than the current, what's before you. So, no other comments?
Drew, a question of you, because only you would probably know the answer to such a thing. Is it one of the issues that the McBryans will suddenly realize is that those trees, which block a nice view, are not on their property?
Correct.
Can they work with a neighbor in order to get a vista corridor on somebody else's property?
Yeah, absolutely, they can. And the commission's seen that before, Willow Bend being the most recent case where there was association property. A gentleman had a property that came to a pinch point, and 25% of that would have meant about a 1-foot wide corridor. And next door was association land, and he got permission from the association so he could have a reasonable sized corridor by counting the 2 lots towards that linear frontage and that 25%. And he had to supply a letter from the association authorizing that, so.
What you're suggesting
Definitely
is, that,
something-
you know, you got to meet Tim Leadham and
Yeah, the
sit
road
down
is
with
private.
Tim.
It's a driveway, and so, yeah. I don't know if it's all Tim's road or.
Yeah, it is. Tim owns from Monomoskoye all the way down and over to his
So,
property.
yeah, as long as we get written permission, that's all you need.
Yeah, I mean, this,
We'll need to, yeah, it's kind of complicated when it gets to 2 properties, because you're recording the permit at the registry of deeds, so it may have to be a dual recording against both properties if you're extending work from one property to the other. But that will be the most complicated part of it. But yes, entirely
yeah,
possible.
absolutely. Yeah. It will be good to see a house fill it in like all the rest of the street. Okay. I would propose that we approve the amendment to the open order of conditions in regards to 91 Bayshore Drive, Paul and Catherine D. McBrien.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Aye?
Aye?
Aye.
Right, it's approved.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll get you the green cards.
Okay, we'll pass around the permits, and first I'm going to pass this around if everybody wouldn't mind signing. This is a certificate of appreciation that we're going to present to Olivia McFarland, who is the intern who has been working with the Conservation Department over the last several months, or over the summer, basically. Olivia has done an unpaid internship 1 day a week. She's working exclusively with Caitlin, and the experience she wanted to gain was outreach and environmental education. And her and Caitlin came up with the idea to attend the Barnstable County Fair and promote the Land Stewards Program and promote awareness of pollinator habitat and the importance of pollinator species. And she's really, helped get conservation on the local map, so to speak, and spread the word. And she's really come up with a lot of great ideas. So we wanted to show our appreciation for that. So there's no signature line, so you could just sign anywhere on the bottom here. And that would be great. So I'll pass that around, and then I'll pass around the permits as well. And then there's a couple of other agenda items that we can go over as you're signing. So you all received, hopefully you received, the letter that I had sent to USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service. Just to give you some background, Natural Resource Conservation Service has branch offices. They're a sub-branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And there's a program that they sponsor, basically, or that they manage, called the Cape Cod Water Resources Grant Program. And you don't sign, Marty, yeah, you do sign, yep. Oh, I'm sorry, Marty, yes, for the certificate, yes, not the permits. Sorry, I thought it was a permit. So NRCS essentially funded the restoration of the Santua Pond fish ladder and associated dam that's part of the fish ladder. The old fish ladder was falling apart, essentially. The dam was being undermined. So it was severely affecting fish passage and overall water quality with Santua Pond in that part, in the southern end. So through the grant program that the NRCS manages, Mashpee got approximately around $375,000 in funding to rebuild the dam and rebuild the fish ladder. Since that time, which was back in 2013, the fish ladder, by virtue of its design, it's what's called a pool and weir ladder. If nobody's ever been out there, I'll be happy to take you out there so you can see it firsthand. It was built with, I believe, 5 pools, cascading down with a weir notch in between each pool that drops down until it reaches the river. And starting from the first year, the first herring migration run, it was quickly discovered that the herring were having a lot of difficulty ascending up the ladder and into the pond. What was happening basically was the pool dimensions are approximately 3.5 to about 3.5 feet deep, depending on how much water is coming down, up to 4 feet deep, and not much longer than about 4 or 5 feet. So what was happening, particularly during high flows and even during low flows, but during the early spring when the herring come up is usually when you get the most precipitation and you get the fastest flows coming out of the pond. The herring were getting up through the weir notches, which are about 18 inches wide, and then when they hit the 4th and 5th pool, the amount of water rushing through the weir notch was hitting the next weir wall and causing a whirlpool turbulent effect that when they're shooting up through the gap of these weir notches, they get knocked off course. The turbulence would be too much to overcome, and they get sent down into the lower pools or sent back down into the river. So what was happening was you were seeing the majority of herring just get washed back down. And eventually, the more they try, the more exhausted they get, and it can result in mortality. So compared to the old ladder before it started to get compromised, the fish passage is greatly reduced. So over the years, since 2013, Marine Fisheries has been brought in to make some seasonal fixes to the ladder. One of the more important fixes they made was they built a wooden weir at the top side on the pond side to reduce the turbulence, to create another weir notch, basically. And that helped the situation. More fish were getting up. But still, the majority were getting blown back down. And really what it boils down to is a case of the pools are too shallow and they're not long enough. Probably a design, and I preface this by saying I am not an engineer, but based on casual observation, if the pools were deeper, fewer in number, and longer, which requires a lot of engineering calculations based on the annual level of the pond. I'm simplifying it greatly, but anecdotally, that's what needs to happen in order to reduce that turbulence. It's all about reducing the turbulence, because the herring can get up through these pools within a split second. They shoot right through the gap, and they're up into the pond within a second. But any turbulence that blows them off course, they lose that energy, and then they just get sent back down, and they try it again and again and again until they can finally get up the ladder. So it's an exhausting, thing that they have to do, and they're hardwired to just keep trying until they get up into the pond. So the purpose of the letter was to, acknowledge, of course, the appreciation of the grant money and having a new structure that was sorely needed, but it's just not performing the way it should. And even though Marine Fisheries has come in and made some fixes that have improved fish passage, these fixes haven't been tested over the long term, and they are seasonal. Boards have to be removed, and some of the fixes they make have to be removed so we can lower the pond level when it gets too high. So the letter is really focused on trying to get a long-term fix to the ladder so that we don't have to keep coming in every year and making these amendments to the ladder to improve fish passage. It shouldn't be that complicated. So, well, hopefully the intent of the letter is to get everybody kind of back in the room, so to speak, discuss it, come out, take a look at it, do some, engineering studies and see what sort of design may work better than the current design. We don't want to see it taken out completely or destroyed or anything like that. We just want to see what can happen as a permanent fix to improve it.
Can they see they can't really see the problem, that the water flow at this time of the year is significantly different than it
Yeah.
is. And so,
Right.
what proof do they need that what you're saying in the application or the letter is reality?
Well, Dick Quinn, who was one of the engineers, he's with Division Marine Fisheries, he was heavily involved in the design, and he came down and did a full assessment of the
That's
ladder, and he
excellent.
drafted a report. And the report, and I'll send it to you, it's a PowerPoint for, I can
Okay,
copy it into a PDF so you can all read it through email. He started right from the very beginning of the presentation, acknowledged that there needs to be a permanent fix. And then he went into the details of what was happening with the turbulence. It gets down into a very, pretty detailed level of calculations of, pond level and flow and everything else that goes in with engineering calculations. But he acknowledged that there's a problem with turbulence. It's not a matter of significant flow coming out. It's the way the ladder is designed and how it's creating turbulence because of the restrictive depth and length of the pools. And it's really the top two pools number 4 and 5, before it hits the pond, that are causing the most washback. Seems like the herring are able to get up the first 3 pools, no problem, and when they hit the 4th one, that turbulence is just too much to overcome because it's gonna be more powerful the closer you get to the pond, up the ladder, and it's just throwing them off course. And 18 inches isn't a lot of room to, if you're shot off course and you're gonna hit a concrete wall, and then you're just gonna go back down again. And they can only try that so many times before they just get completely exhausted. One of the interesting things about, and we were out there a few times a week for, the entire summer observing. And every time we went out there, we would literally see hundreds, if not thousands, of herring at the base of the fish ladder, all gathered in a little kind of pool area where the river meets the structure. And you walk downstream, and for several hundred feet downstream, it's just nothing but herring. And that shouldn't be the case. There shouldn't be that kind of backup. There was a theory thrown out, and it is plausible that there's more fish passage at night, because we've gone back down very early in the morning and seen little to no fish. And we walked downstream to see if there's any heavy mortality, and there wasn't any evidence of heavy mortality. So the theory of night passage to avoid predators is certainly something worth considering, but there's been no official long-term study about that. It's just something that was thrown out as an explanation as to why you see hundreds one day and almost none the next. And it could be predation, too. We don't know. I did conduct a few night studies, night counts, just to check it out, because I was really curious about that. I'm like, because you do see more cormorants here, and ospreys are on the rebound, so there's no shortage of predators. When I went out there, and I did it on 2 different occasions, at 2 different times at night, and I saw the exact same conditions as during the day. And granted, I was only out there for about a half hour each time. So that's not a big enough sample size to really draw a conclusion either way. But what I saw was the exact same thing during the day. I didn't see any fish coming up the ladder. I saw them getting blown back down, and I saw hundreds in the pool below and the river behind it. So that's really what this letter is about, is trying to get people back into the room and see what's going on and see if they can come up with a reasonable long-term fix. So, and last thing is, Caitlin was unable to make tonight's meeting, but she did have some updates for everybody, so I'll just go through them real quick.
good.
Olivia's last day was Wednesday, and you guys signed the certificate of appreciation. Tree removal is continuing from storms over the winter with DPW over in Santua Pond Preserve, Quashnet Woods, and Bessie Bog conservation areas. We have a AmeriCorps individual placement starting on October 1st, who's going to be with us 1 day a week. I don't think we've decided what project she's going to work on, but it'll have something to do with the Land Stewards Program and volunteer recruitment. If you haven't been over to the Santua Pond Preserve parking lot, Caitlin earlier this week worked with some volunteers on Monday to spread wood chips all around the areas where the trees and shrubs were planted. Half the parking lot is done, so the other half remains, and DPW has dropped off another load of wood chips so we can finish that. And if you're ever interested in helping with these projects, just let us know, and we'll let you know the date and time when they're occurring. But that parking lot looks great.
Oh, it does.
It really is such a huge improvement. New citations for illegal dumping, which we all know Caitlin loves to do, at the Mashpee River Woodlands. She has a hearing coming up for dumping at Pickerel Cove, which is scheduled for September. Not a significant dumping, but she's going to pursue each case to the end. She helped with pollinator gardens at the Preserve Our Homeland camp at the end of July at Mashpee Stables, which is a tribal property. And she's also asking any land stewards if they want to help with the new Community Garden Revitalization Committee to clean up the garden beds over at the community garden. If anyone hasn't been there recently, they've already done half the beds.
Really?
And it looks great so far. So this Saturday, I think they're gonna have another work day, if anyone's interested. Just pulling weeds, all kinds of fun stuff.
I do
Getting
in
the
my yard.
gardens back to a state of readiness. So this has been a whole committee set up to manage the community gardens, because they really weren't managed thoroughly last time, and that kind of resulted in a low number of people renting the plots. So it's gonna, kind of their effort is to put it back on the map and see if they can get more people to participate in the community gardens. The Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge Trail Map and History Book are in the final stages. The next partners meeting, annual meeting, will be in September or October, and we'll send out notice to everybody when that meeting will occur. She continues to assist the Department of Natural Resources with water quality testing. Hopefully soon we'll be receiving the count data from this year's herring runs, to see what the numbers are from Marine Fisheries and Association for Preservation of Cape Cod. And she continues to do more trail clearing at Mashpee River Woodlands, and we're going to schedule AmeriCorps for more projects, trail clearing on all of our conservation lands. So that's it.
Busy.
Okay. Do I have
Would you like to move to adjourn? Okay, I would move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.